Should I make a video about this? No, definitely not. It's scary enough out there on Twitter. And now Elon's taking away the block button. No, but I should. No, I really should. I really should make a video about this. I really should explain myself and how a lot of other people are feeling. But no, I'm just a whiny UK person. I'm just a whiny UK person and we don't matter anyway. Oh, it's so hard to know what to do. Okay, I'm making the video. But let me tell you, if you can't take any criticism about AEW or anything like that, or you're not capable of understanding why some people may be disappointed about the build or the card of All In, please click off. Just please click off now. I don't need the views. I don't want them. Click off now. So let's get into it. AEW has dropped the ball with All In. Now, I've got to preface by saying I think All In is going to be a great show. I mean, of course it is. It's going to be over 80,000 people in Wembley Stadium. That's going to be a spectacle, at least. Like, that's going to look amazing on TV. And I do believe that all the wrestlers on the card will be working their absolute hardest to put on the best show they possibly can. So no one is saying that All In isn't going to be a good show. No one is saying that. But what people are saying is it could have been, and it should have been, a much better built show with a more spectacular card. Now, wait. Before you tell me how excited you are to see Kenny Omega in a multi-man match, just hear me out. Just hear me out. There's people from the UK and Ireland complaining. They're so miserable, aren't they? Well, let's have a little history lesson, because some of you may not know about what it's really like being a wrestling fan from this part of the world. Maybe some of you are too young to have experienced like the full extent of being a wrestling fan from this part of the world. Maybe some of you are American, so you just have no idea. So let's have a quick history lesson of what it's like being a fan across the pond, on why sometimes we feel a little bit like we get bare minimum. When I started watching wrestling, and that was in like the mid to late 90s, you had to work really hard to be a wrestling fan. And I was a kid and I didn't even know how hard I had to work. Like, I found it by accident, and that's kind of the way you came across it. You also had to start on a lifelong habit of staying up really, really late to watch shows. I mean, we put in the dedication, and the reward was never there. I mean, everyone talks about SummerSlam 1992. I became a fan years after that. But that event was like an anomaly. Like, that's not what UK fans were getting. That's why it's so big and so memorable. We did used to get these UK only pay-per-views from WWE. And I remember like the first time they did them, I was so excited that I was going to get to watch pay-per-view at a normal time. I was like begging my mom to order it, all this stuff. And then when it happened afterwards, I realized that this was like a non-canon event. Like, nothing important was ever going to happen on these shows because the Americans weren't watching. Like, nothing was happening. It wasn't even canon. So as a UK fan, like, you have that history of being let down. WWE eventually started giving us Raws and SmackDowns, but of course they were not broadcast live in the US. They were usually shows where like this set was just dressed up like it was in the UK, and it was all more of a novelty because like the Americans weren't watching this live. But in recent years, WWE has really stepped things up. Okay, they gave us Clash at the Castle, and that was a huge show and totally in canon. And I think this was able to happen because of the WWE network and them doing like the Saudi shows where it showed that American fans were able to watch pay-per-views at other times. And then of course we just got Money in the Bank, which was amazing. Like, we finally got one of like the big 5 pay-per-views coming to the UK, not something that was created like just for this. So WWE have been doing really well for UK fans in recent years. Then AEW announces All In at Wembley Stadium, and it is absolutely wild that they chose Wembley Stadium, and absolutely wild that they've sold so many tickets for it. Like, it is such a huge achievement. But the very fact of this venue, Wembley Stadium, meant that expectations were so high. Biggest show they've ever done. And the ticket sales show that the interest and appetite for AEW over here was there. The announcement was really, really hype. But hype-wise, things just died down pretty quickly. And it would end up being a long time before we got any semblance of a card to do with All In. And this thought was then planted in the head of quite a few fans over here in the UK of, hang on, are we not getting something WrestleMania caliber? Instead, are we getting something more Capital Carnage caliber? The way they've been hyping up All In on TV, aside from the match announcements, has been really interesting because they just haven't been hyping it up properly at all. Few wrestlers are actually talking about the show or the magnitude of the show, or kind of putting forward their matches as like it has to happen on this grand stage. It almost seems like they kind of don't want to mention that this big show is happening, which kind of also gives off the feel that it's something kind of more outside the universe than this big event that AEW is holding, because AEW is so big and so great that they have to take it on to this massive stage. I saw someone from America who is in a really great position in the wrestling industry, should I say, just being like, this is your Saudi show. And I really think that we were promised more than a Saudi show. I mean, we have bought, actually purchased 80,000 tickets. But it's not just that, like, we were expecting something. It's also that this is like the biggest opportunity for AEW. I don't think they're going to sell 80,000 tickets again. I don't think the success of All In can be replicated. So for them, it's a real dropping of the ball for them not to hype up how big this show is, for them not to be talking about it every week for months on end, like the actual wrestlers talking about it and having All In as their destination, as the thing that they want to do, the show that they have to be on because it's so important. I mean, it's interesting that AEW hasn't even got any footage of Wembley to show off on their TV show how big Wembley is, like the scale of Wembley. There's amazing video packages that they could have put together just on the magnitude of Wembley that they haven't even done, to give those who are not familiar with Wembley at all, like their American viewers, like a true idea of the scale of this show and the history of this place. So looking at the card, we know for the pre-show that we're getting Aussie Open versus MJF and Adam Cole for the Ring of Honor tag team titles. I think it'll be a good match. It's a really interesting, kind of risky idea to put your main event wrestlers also in a pre-show match. It's not something that I would have done, just because I would have wanted it to be like, this world title match is so important that this is what they have to focus on, and there's no way that they would do a match earlier that night. And I felt like when MJF and Adam Cole did their promos and Dynamite, and then they were attacked by Aussie Open, it kind of cheapened what they were saying about the world title match, and B, it really like cheapened Aussie Open because they just dispatched of them easily too. And it's just kind of like weird to me that you're putting the world champion and his challenger out there in front of fans to pop for, so that the reaction they get at the end of the night is based on this being the second time fans have seen them that night. So it's an odd decision. I'm sure it'll be a great match, but it's an unusual one. The FTR match versus the Young Bucks. Now, I don't know what's going to happen due to Cash Wheeler's recent legal troubles, but let's pretend for now that I don't know about that and just say I think this is going to be a really great match, and I think that this is actually a Wembley worthy match. This is one that like I have no complaints about good for AEW for booking this one. This is, to me, like the biggest tag team match that you can do. The women's four-way, Hikaru Shida, Toni Storm, Saraya, and Britt Baker. Okay, AEW, Tony has been getting a lot of criticism about the booking of the women's division in recent weeks, recent months. I wrote an article about that on my Substack. I'll link it in the description. Go read it because everything I said still stands. We're getting the usual like smokescreen thing here. People complained about the women's division. So Tony did a women's main event with a shock title change, another women's main event, and created a tournament. I wish that like two of these women were just given the TV time to tell a really compelling story going into this show rather than being put in a four-way. Love Hikaru Shida, really happy for her being champion, but Toni Storm, given like the heel character that she's doing, and you know the stuff as an Australian she's willing to say about the UK, I think that she would have been a great heel champion going into this. Actually, that the crowd would have really relished in booing. Obviously, it's really unfortunate what happened to Jamie Hayter, but this is something where I wish that we were focusing on a really good storyline here instead of just a multi-woman match. Yeah, which tends to be that Tony takes any criticism directed towards the women's division. His answer is to just throw out more women's matches, more women's wrestlers, rather than actually address any of the complaints that people are making. Darby Allin and Sting versus AR Fox and Swerve. I think this will be a really good match. I love the storyline that Swerve and Darby have been doing with Nick Wayne. My only thing is that I think Nick Wayne should have either been in this match or not appeared on TV since that awful beatdown that he got, you know, to sell the injury. But I think that this is of course going to be a good match. I am excited for this match, and I really like the storyline that these ones are doing. So this is not like a match that I can fault at all. Love Sting, and I'm so glad he's getting the match at Wembley. I'm glad it won't be his last match ever as well. Okay, here's the controversial one. The Golden Elite, Kota Ibushi, Kenny Omega, and Hangman Adam Page versus Takeshita and Juice and Jay White from Bullet Club Gold. This match was made official on Dynamite in what I thought was a terrible setup. We had Kenny Omega doing an interview with Jim Ross. This was really badly filmed. I don't know how anyone watched this back and thought, yeah, this is fine for TV. It came off so hokey, so low rent. It was just bad. And then, you know, there was the attack from Juice and Jay. There were Jim Ross's odd facials going down. Like usually people say that the reason to keep Jim Ross around is that he's so good at sit down interviews. This one was just so poorly directed and executed. That certainly wasn't an example of that. Then you had the weird thing with Hangman, who was definitely not outside a hospital and, you know, holding a can of alcohol so that we can get into, you know, so that you can let fans that enjoy like the lore of it all like make up their own storyline rather than stuff that we're seeing on screen. I love Kenny, okay, and that is where all my criticism of this is coming from. Kenny is one of my top maybe 3 wrestlers in the world right now, and he's 100% in my top 10 of all time, and he's in the higher end of that. So no criticism of Kenny Omega. Kenny should have a singles match on this show. When AEW was formed, the idea that Kenny Omega was going to be wrestling weekly for North American promotion was an absolute dream come true. They've never got what they could out of Kenny Omega, and what you could get out of Kenny Omega is like what we saw him do with OSPREAY at Wrestle Kingdom. But for this show, he really should have had a singles match as one of the best wrestlers in the world, if not of all time. And I get that him teaming with KOTA is a big deal, and there's a lot of lore behind it. And believe me, I know the lore. I know all the Golden Lovers stuff. But none of this has been put forward on AEW television. This is something where, like, you have to be in the know of it to know. And I'm not sure that it's great for your viewing audience who aren't that hardcore into this stuff to have to work all that out for themselves. Like, they have to work out why Kenny and Kota together is special rather than anything that's been told to you from actual AEW. Kenny facing Will Ospreay at All In would have been amazing. You know, there are 2 matches they've had this year already are like unbeatable so far when it comes to the best matches of the year list. Now, maybe New Japan wouldn't allow them to do that match, though. I have heard it said that what's more likely is that Chris Jericho got in there first to take Will Ospreay. And I think I kind of believe that one more. And I think if Kenny thought of himself even close to as highly as Jericho does, Kenny would have a singles match on this show. But Kenny doesn't seem to ever want to push for himself to be in prestigious positions. And I don't know Kenny Omega, so I don't know if he's a humble person or not. Like, I don't know if he walks around saying, oh, you know, I'm not that great, or if he walks around telling everyone that he is the greatest wrestler in the world. But one thing's for sure is that he doesn't fight enough to put himself in prominent positions, and maybe he doesn't want to be in those prominent positions. And whatever is true, it's like someone needs to grab him and say, man, you're Kenny Omega, you know, the god of pro wrestling, the best bout machine. Please just do the biggest things possible. I mean, you're in like your late 30s. Like, how much longer do we have of Kenny dream matches or big Kenny singles matches? And the work he's done with Ospreay this year has been so incredible. And this guy needed a solo match at All In. So let's say Ospreay has been taken by Jericho. If there was ever a chance, I must say, if there was ever a chance of them doing Ospreay Omega and Tony said no because Jericho got in there to take Ospreay first, that's a huge feeling on Tony Khan's part, like huge. But we'll get more into the Ospreay stuff when we look at that match. Obviously Danielson's injured. That sucks. I think Kenny could put on a great singles match with Takeshita. I honestly wouldn't mind him having a singles match with Moxley. I would have absolutely loved, and I know this is coming from me, so you probably won't take it seriously, I would have loved him to have a singles match with Jay White, because his match with Jay White in New Japan, the fuck you Switchblade match, is one of my favorite Jay White matches of all time. And I think that they could have built that really well. I think it would have been really good in ring. So I don't see any excuse for them not using Kenny Omega in a singles match. Look, this is all elite wrestling. Kenny is your singles guy in the elite, no matter how much he wants to do trio stuff. He should have a singles match in the show. And for everyone saying, stop complaining, you're getting to see Kenny Omega. You're getting to see him team with Kota Ibushi in a trios match. You're getting all that. Cool. That doesn't mean that I can't say that I wouldn't have wanted to see him in a singles match. I don't think Kenny has even ever wrestled a singles match in the UK. A lot of people, this would be their first time ever seeing Kenny Omega. And I'm sure seeing him in a top level singles match would have been an amazing, like, breathtaking experience. He's so incredible. And I did just wish he was given a more prominent spot, singles spot. Eddie Kingston, Orange Cassidy, Best Friends, and Lucha Brothers versus the Blackpool Combat Club. This is a Stadium Stampede match. Okay, I don't know how a Stadium Stampede match is going to work in Wembley Stadium. I guess it's going to be more like Anarchy in the Arena. When they announced Stadium Stampede match, I thought that just sounds like a Hail Mary, like to get people excited about the idea of a Stadium Stampede match and like kind of plaster over any problems to do with the build or lack of announcements or whatever. To me, it just felt like a Hail Mary. I saw someone on Twitter say it should have been called Anarchy in the UK. Yes, it definitely should have been called Anarchy in the UK. This to me like also shows poor planning, because I don't believe that they would have done the Anarchy in the Arena at Double or Nothing if they were going to do another, basically that match again at Wembley, and they want it to be really special for Wembley. I just don't know how like a plunder match is going to work in a venue the size of Wembley. I can see it getting like out of control and fans really not being able to see enough of it, if you know what I mean. Let's also touch on like how hilarious it is that Orange Cassidy is the international champion and he's not defending the international title on their biggest international show. That's absolutely wild. And Orange Cassidy was on this amazing run. There was a storyline going on like week to week, and it seemed like they just kind of dropped that because they hadn't fully planned out Cassidy's direction. Because really, if there was ever going to be a big title switch for the international title, it should probably happen on international soil at Wembley Stadium. I think there's not really much I can say about this match. I do think it was just something thrown together for like, yeah, we'll call it Stadium Stampede and people will be really excited about that. I would love to have seen Kingston versus Moxley as a singles match. That would have been so good. Like, I salivate over that. You know, I love Eddie Kingston. Maybe this is going to be better when they announce who the TBA people are, but you know, it's gonna, I just can't say that I'm like falling over myself with excitement for another Blackpool Combat Club Plunder multi-man Stadium Stampede Anarchy in the Arena whatever match. CM Punk versus Samoa Joe. I do think that Joe is Punk's greatest rival. Punk is of course my favorite wrestler. With this match, I just wish that they hadn't faced each other in the Owen Hart tournament, and then it would have been like really super, super special. This feels like one where the original plan for Punk was maybe something else. It's like Punk is currently feuding with, you know, Jay White. He's feuding with Ricky Starks. He's feuding with Samoa Joe. He's technically feuding with MJF because he's calling himself the real world champion. And out of all those feuds, the Joe one seems the least important. And that's the one that is getting the Wembley match. So yeah, it's, I just like, I can't bring myself to dunk on CM Punk versus Samoa Joe because I know it's going to be really great. And I love both these wrestlers. One I love more than anyone else, but it's also like not the match I would have booked for CM Punk. I think giving Ricky Starks that big stage at Wembley would have been really, really good. Really good for Ricky, and I think it would have been really good for Jay White as well. But alas, Punk versus Joe for the second time in the past few months. Will Ospreay versus Chris Jericho. This to me is just like a total vanity match on both guys' ends. For Ospreay, it's a huge deal to work with Chris Jericho. That's someone that he totally idolizes. And for Jericho, it's getting a singles match on the biggest show of all time against what, like, the greatest wrestling talent to come out of the UK. Like, to me, Ospreay is the best wrestler the UK has ever produced. He's one of the top wrestlers in the world right now. So, you know, that's good for Jericho to be the guy that's against him. Build for this was horrendous. And it was obviously hampered by the fact that Ospreay was in the G1, but there's so much they could have done for this instead. So Ospreay was around in AEW before the G1. He did Forbidden Door. They could have started like building to this around that time, like before the G1 started. We could have had Ospreay challenge Jericho, or Jericho challenge Ospreay. Jericho could challenge Ospreay in a way to prove himself against someone that people are saying is the best, is like really innovative. Jericho could have called on like his past when he was young, like how great and innovative he was, and done it as that kind of old school versus new school, like Jericho testing himself against the great young wrestler. Or they could have done it as Ospreay just calling out Jericho because he's one of the biggest stars in AEW and he's already taken down Kenny Omega. And then Don Callis could have been used as like a conduit stand-in for Ospreay in the weeks during G1. There could have been video packages. There's a lot they could have done. So the past couple of weeks, what we've been getting is Don Callis and Chris Jericho lore. So we've been having like the stories of them when they were young, you know, training together, working with Bad News Allen. all this stuff. And it's like, I spoke before about Golden Lovers lore and stuff like that, and people are really into that. Like, they're Tumblring about that. No one's on Tumblr talking about Chris Jericho, Don Callis lore. So them just kind of bringing that out to use as, this storyline, it's kind of like, okay, guys, like, good for you, but I'm not sure how intriguing a story this is. And then it was also woven into the JAS breakup stuff where you had like Sammy and Danny getting involved. And if that's the end of the JAS, like Sammy and Danny, like they don't even get the big match with Jericho out of it. I'm sure they'll face Jericho sometime down the line, but they're not getting the Wembley match or anything. They're just like side characters in this story that was essentially about Jericho and Don Callis, not even Jericho and Will Ospreay, the person who's going to wrestle, Jericho and Don Callis. The Don Callis, like Jericho lore that they lent on was all of this stuff from like way back in the day in Canada when everyone had a full head of hair. Whereas a better like actual Don Callis thing could have been talking about how Don set up the match between Omega and Chris Jericho that basically led to the formation of AEW. And now he's going to test Jericho again against someone younger and better. And maybe they could have gone back into the lore and made it that like Callis always hated Jericho or something. I don't know. But like that Don and Chris in the ring, I thought was like badly scripted. It was like trying to be too clever of like a turn within a turn type swervy stuff where it's like it was obvious that Jericho and Callis weren't gonna end up as best friends, but instead of Jericho rejecting him, Jericho actually says yes. But then Don thought that Jericho was going to reject him, which if you thought that, Don, what the heck have you been doing the past couple of weeks? So then we had this awkward thing with the painting. And then, out of nowhere, Will Ospreay just does an attack. With Ospreay, I have said, I think he's the greatest wrestler ever to come out of the UK. Not everyone in the UK knows who Ospreay is. I saw Dave say that this could be like Bret and Bulldog. It's not, because the British Bulldog was very well known in the UK at the time of SummerSlam 1992. Like, very, very well known. And Ospreay hasn't been presented in that way. And there is a ton of stuff they could have done to get Ospreay in the minds of people in the UK. But he hasn't even been presented or fully given a story really ever on AEW television. He's just this guy that comes in and has amazing matches. But Ospreay isn't even part of the company. So I don't but Dave really does inflate who Ospreay is in the UK. And let me tell you, this match, no matter what they do, is going to get a really high rating from Dave. But there's a lot they could have done with Ospreay. They could have announced this match, as I said, ages ago, and done so much with video packages if they didn't have him around, or Don Callis talking for Ospreay. Instead, Don Callis has just been talking about himself and his relationship with Jericho. If anything, given the storyline, it should be Callis versus Jericho at Wembley Stadium, because my God, these guys have a ton of history that we've heard about. So that sounds like it would be a really big match. And that's not me saying that this isn't a big match. I'm just saying I don't think they went about it the right way. Also, I have to say that Jericho turning face before this match really doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense if you see it as this is probably what he wants, because he probably wants to do some Judas entrance where everyone sings along, and he wants this moment to look as good as possible for him. That's really what he wants. If this was like a truly unselfish act, I think you would have Ospreay being presented as this big face to get this massive hometown face reaction, where like people who may not even really know who he is are cheering for him just because he's the good guy from the UK. But I don't know what the crowd reaction is going to be to either of these guys, but definitely the way things have been set up, it looks like what they want the crowd to do is like have 80,000 people or whatever sing Judas, rather than people cheering on a guy that's from their country. So yeah, do I think this match is going to be good? I think probably because Osprey's such a high caliber performer. I think they'll pull, some tricks out of the bag. Osprey will be wrestling the day before in Rev Pro, and everybody come down to Rev Pro. That's going to be an amazing show. I'm not going to say anything more about that match, but that's just kind of how I feel about the build to all this. And then the main event, MJF versus Adam Cole. This is definitely worthy of a Wembley show. I just wish I felt like it was going to be the end of their storyline. It's going to be the massive blow up match. And I don't think it's going to be that at all. I think they're going to face each other again. Look, I haven't liked any of the MJF and Adam Cole vignettes or any stuff like that. Like, it's way too much comedy for me. It's just not what I'm into. However, I think that these two are really, really over. They've gotten their storyline over. I'm not sure if the way they're over, I'm not sure if it's that the fans actually want to see them have a match, or if they're over because the fans want to see them together and their team up has done so well. But I'm not going to fault the MJF Adam Cole stuff. I'm totally don't have anything against it being on the card or main eventing. The world title should main event. And I think this is going to be a really good match. And it absolutely, belongs in the card. You can't really fault the build at all because this has been given the most TV time out of anything. It's been going on the longest. And that's, what we wanted from the show. Matches that were built long term and given a lot of TV time. So this one has it. Another thing I just wanted to touch on was the promotion for All In. So I didn't expect AEW to promote this show well outside of what they're doing on their TV. I can't say that my expectations were high for AEW's promotion of this show outside of their own TV, because the way they handle promotion to me is very strange. But I did at least expect more than what we've had. We've had really minimal promotion for it, especially over here in the UK. I saw the other night that they were projecting AEW on buildings, projecting Sting's face inside of the building. I'm not sure that really cuts it at all as far as promotion. They've obviously taken out ads in newspapers. There was a big ad in the Metro. There are ads on buses. When I was in London, I didn't see any. I saw lots of Money in the Bank ones, though. I did see some posters for All In an alleyway in Soho. Not like any big billboards or anything like that. That's not saying that they don't have them, but as far as actual promotion, doing media and stuff, it's been so minimal. I don't think AEW is able to compel the wrestlers to do the amount and level of media that WWE does. Well, actually, I know they're not able to do that. WWE are hey, Sheamus, get on a plane, you're going to the UK and you're going to promote some stuff weeks in advance of a UK show or whatever like that. I'm just using Sheamus as an example. Damian Priest, that's a guy that they've flown over quite a lot of times. That level hasn't been there with AEW. They did use Jeff Jarrett coming over, but any, I think, big push of promotion that they're going to do as far as TV spots and stuff, I guess is going to be done in the days leading up to it, when really they've had so much time to present this show to the wider UK public whose only knowledge of wrestling is WWE as this big massive deal. And they just haven't done it. But this is not something that I should be talking about. And this is something that I have talked about probably too much already, both publicly and privately with people. But their relationship to the idea of publicity PR is very unique to me. So I am someone that studied journalism at university, and I did not start off in the wrestling business. I've done fashion, at a big magazine I worked at and experienced that side of things when it comes to PR and stuff. I've done music, experienced working with big artists, small artists, everything, film, all of that kind of stuff. So I have like loads of experience in how the whole like PR game works when you're a journalist. And of course, I have wrestling experience, dealing with WWE and Impact Wrestling, just to name a few. So I've always found the way AEW goes about things to be quite frustrating. And I don't like, I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. It's just something that they haven't figured out yet. And I know that like steps have been taken to make things better, but I haven't seen like any kind of major increase. So the way I see things that is when you're a journalist and you're working with a company, a product, a piece of entertainment, whatever, it's like one or of two ways. It's either you, the journalist, are doing this, whatever it is, a favor by giving them coverage. So, for example, you know, someone will contact me about something. Maybe it's like a product being launched by some celebrity, let's say, and they want to get publicity for it. And they'll offer me an interview. And, you know, I'm essentially, you know, doing them a favor by promoting this thing. Or it's like totally 50-50. And that's what I would say things are when it comes to WWE and Impact Wrestling. They are like really good at giving you stuff, you know, giving you interviews, giving you like really good stuff that you can use. And in turn, you're giving them publicity. And it feels like, you know, a 50-50 thing. And WWE also like do a lot of great things as well to get good coverage, like make you feel taken care of, important and stuff like that. I think with AEW, when they started this idea of doing the Tony Khan conference calls and then the scrums, I think they kind of saw that as their work done. And for me, like I was always really just like wondering like what is going on. And someone said something to me, it was about a year ago, and I'm not going to like repeat what they said. And I know that they didn't mean this in like any kind of like malicious way or like nasty way. And they probably never thought about it again once they said it. Like to them, it's probably something totally innocuous, but to me, it like stuck in my mind. But the thing that they said made like a light bulb go off in my head and be like, oh, okay. To them, this is like they're doing you a favor, if you know what I mean, rather than it being you saying like, I would love to promote your show. In exchange, can you give me something that I can promote it with? They seem to take it as, oh, we're doing you a favor by letting you promote our show, or, you know, giving you something. I don't really know how to explain it, but that's kind of to me like how they seem to think of things. That at least like that's the impression I get when I compare it with like how I see WWE and Impact do promotion. And I think they just don't have it internally, you know, figured out. And it would have been awesome if they'd had that figured out before this massive show. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I think that they really have missed an opportunity to really get one over on WWE as well. Like they're putting on a bigger show than WWE ever has in the UK, but I think due to like the lack of promotion and everything like that, it just